The organ's final notes died into a silence that felt like drowning. I stood at the altar in a cathedral that suddenly seemed too vast, too cold, the white lace of my gown tight against my ribs, as if the fabric itself knew what I refused to accept. 300 guests, towering stained glass, golden light that should have been sacred but now felt like exposure under an interrogation lamp. Scott wasn't coming. My fingers clutched the small leather purse dangling from my wrist, the one he'd given me 3 days ago with a kiss and a smile. Hold on to this for me, baby. Just until after the honeymoon. Work stuff. The flash drive inside it had seemed so innocent then. Now it pulsed like a bomb.
My phone buzzed against my thigh.
I glanced down at the screen hidden in the folds of silk. The air left my lungs. Diamond, my maid of honor, Keisha, materialized beside me, her face ashen beneath her makeup. Her hand found mine, squeezed once. He's not in the building. Nobody's seen him since last night. I already knew. Had known since I walked down that endless aisle alone while the whispers started like fire catching kindling. But hearing it spoken aloud made it real, in a way my denial couldn't fight. The murmurs grew louder. I caught fragments over the blood rushing in my ears. Federal agents outside. They say she was carrying something. She didn't know, did she? Poor thing.
Poor thing.
The pity was worse than the accusation. Miss Johnson. The voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Official, cold, final. A man in a dark suit emerged from the side aisle. Not a guest. The wrong kind of dark suit. The kind that came with a badge and a gun, and the power to destroy what was left of my life. I'm Agent Morrison, FBI. I need you to come with me for questioning regarding possession of stolen federal property. My mouth went dry. I didn't know. Ma'am. His hand moved to his hip. Not threatening. Just ready. We can do this quietly, or we can do this the hard way. But you're coming with us. The cathedral blurred. My knees threatened to buckle. This wasn't just being left at the altar. This was prison. This was my life ending in white lace and federal handcuffs while 300 people watched. The cathedral doors exploded inward with a sound like thunder splitting stone. Every head whipped toward the entrance. Every whisper died. Even Agent Morrison froze, his hand now fully on his weapon, his entire body coiled and wary. He entered like darkness, made flesh.
Tall.
Broad-shouldered. Flanked by 2 men in suits so perfectly tailored they looked like weapons themselves. But it was the man at the center who commanded every eye, every breath, every terrified heartbeat in that sacred space. His suit was black. Not wedding black. Kill you in it black. The kind of fabric that whispered obscene wealth and zero conscience. His hair was slicked back from a face of sharp, brutal beauty, all angles and controlled violence. But it was his eyes that made my stomach drop.
Dark. Piercing.
Fixed on me with the focus of a predator who'd already decided I belonged to him. He walked down the aisle with the unhurried confidence of a man who'd never been told no, who'd never needed permission, who owned everything he looked at. His guards fanned out with military precision. One murmured into a radio. Another positioned himself between the federal agents and the exit. Agent Morrison's hand moved away from his weapon. Something in his posture shifted from aggressive to careful. Diamond Johnson. My name in his voice sounded like a verdict.
Low.
Resonant. With the barest trace of an accent that turned each syllable into something dangerous. He stopped 3 feet from me. Close enough that I could smell cedar and something darker. Close enough that I could see the cold fury barely leashed behind those eyes. I managed a nod. My voice was trapped somewhere behind the panic closing my throat. My name is Park Ye-jun. He said it like I should recognize it. Like it should mean something. When I showed no reaction, Something flickered across his face. Surprise. Or perhaps disappointment. You don't know who I am. I shook my head. His gaze flicked to the empty space where Scott should have been standing, then back to me. When he spoke again, his voice carried through the entire cathedral, a performance for every witness present. Your fiancé worked for me. Indirectly. The word fiancé dripped with contempt. He owed me a debt. A significant debt. One he believed he could escape by. His gaze traveled deliberately over my dress, the altar, the frozen guests, creating distractions. The cathedral tilted. I gripped the altar rail to stay upright. I don't understand. You do. His certainty was worse than any accusation. You're beginning to. Agent Morrison stepped forward. Mr. Park, this woman is wanted for. Scott Tom stole from me. June didn't even glance at the agent. His focus remained locked on me, dissecting me, seeing through me. He stole the Black Ledger, a digital asset worth $2 billion in offshore holdings. He planted the encrypted device on you before he ran. The purse at my wrist suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. I would never. I know. He cut me off, and the flat certainty in his voice sent ice down my spine. You were the shield, Miss Johnson, not the thief. A waitress with no criminal record, no connections, no reason to be suspected. The perfect unwitting accomplice. Then why? My voice cracked. Why are you here? Something that might have been a smile ghosted across his mouth. It wasn't comforting. Because the debt remains. And because he stepped closer. So close I could feel the heat radiating from him despite the cold calculation in his eyes. Scott Tom made a critical error in judgment. June reached into his jacket. Every federal agent in the room tensed. He withdrew a leather portfolio with the casual disdain of a king dismissing servants. You'll find Miss Johnson is under my legal protection as of 40 minutes ago. Emergency injunction filed in federal court citing prosecutorial overreach. The warrant is suspended pending a full hearing. He handed the documents to Agent Morrison. Touch her, and you're in contempt. Morrison's face as he scanned the papers told the story. This was real. This is highly irregular. My attorneys are very expensive, Agent Morrison. June's voice dropped to something soft and lethal. Would you like to discover exactly how irregular things can become? The agents retreated toward the side exit. Not leaving, just regrouping. They'd be back. June turned back to me, and I felt the full weight of his attention like a physical force. Your fiancé isn't coming, Miss Johnson. His voice softened fractionally, not with pity, with something far more dangerous. He was never going to marry you. This ceremony was theater, a distraction while he caught a flight to Seoul with my asset and left you holding the evidence. The bouquet slipped from my numb fingers. White roses scattered across marble like petals on a grave. The debt remains, June continued. $2 billion plus interest. Plus the insult of believing I wouldn't notice. I don't have that kind of money. The words came out broken. I don't have any money. I'm a waitress. I know exactly who you are, Diamond Johnson. The way he said my name, intimate, possessive, sent heat racing up my spine despite the terror coiling in my gut. I know about your 3 jobs to pay off your mother's medical bills. I know about the exclusive clubs where you serve billion-dollar deals and remember every face, every order, every whispered conversation. I know about your photographic memory and the way you see patterns others miss. Each fact was a violation. Proof he'd been watching me, studying me. For how long?
How?
I breathed. I make it my business to know the value of things. His eyes held mine. And you, Miss Johnson, are far more valuable than you realize. One of his guards approached, murmuring in rapid Korean. Jun nodded once, then returned his focus to me. We're out of time. The federal agents are calling for backup, and my lawyers can only stall them for so long. Then what do you want from me? The question came out sharper than intended. Panic and anger finally finding voice. Park Ye-jun smiled. It was not a comforting expression. It was the smile of a man who'd already won, who'd calculated every move, who held all the cards and was about to show me exactly how powerless I was. I want you to marry me, Diamond. Right here. Right now. The cathedral spun. I want you to become my wife, my asset, and my key to recovering what your fiancé stole. He stepped closer, so close I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, the barely controlled rage simmering beneath that perfect control. And in exchange, I'll give you something Scott Tom never would. What? The word was barely a whisper. His hand lifted, fingers brushing my jaw with shocking gentleness. Revenge. Before we dive deeper into this story, take a moment to hit that like button if you love suspenseful, emotional stories that keep you on the edge of your seat. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next thrilling chapter. We also want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Whether it's your city, your country, or even just your favorite spot to watch these stories, we love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's get back to the story and see just how far courage can take someone when danger is closing in. Revenge. The word hung in the air between us like a promise and a threat. I don't understand. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. What could I possibly? The black ledger. Ye-jun's fingers dropped from my jaw, but his proximity remained suffocating. The device your fiancé gave you contains access codes and coordinates to every offshore account, every asset, every holding that keeps my organization operational. $2 billion in liquid capital. Without it, my empire collapses. My enemies circle, and everyone who depends on my protection becomes a target. 2 billion. The number was so vast it lost meaning. I'd served people who spent that much on yachts they never used, but holding it, being responsible for it? Scott told me it was client files. Business documents he needed to keep secure during the wedding. The words tasted like ash. How many lies had I swallowed without question? How many times had I smiled and nodded while he weaponized my trust? Scott Tom lied about everything. Ye-jun's voice dropped lower, almost gentle in its cruelty. His name.
His job.
His intentions. He spent 6 months building a relationship with you for one purpose, to have a disposable shield when he ran. The cathedral swayed. Or maybe I did. The federal agents will be back within the hour. Ye-jun continued, his tone shifting to pure business. They have the serial number of the encrypted device. They have witness statements placing it in your possession. And they have enough circumstantial evidence to hold you for months while they build their case. He paused, letting the reality sink in. You'll lose your jobs, your apartment, your freedom, and Scott will be halfway across the world, untouchable. So, you're here to help me? The bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. Out of the goodness of your heart? I'm here because you're valuable. His eyes glittered with something dark and calculating. You know Scott's habits, his patterns, his weaknesses. You're the key to finding him and recovering what he stole. But I need leverage to keep the federal agents away from you long enough to make that happen. What kind of leverage? Ye-jun's smile was all predator. Marriage. Immediate. Legal. Binding. The floor disappeared beneath me. You can't be serious. Spousal privilege protects you from testifying. My lawyers can tie the federal case in knots for months. And as my wife, you become untouchable to anyone foolish enough to come after what's mine. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle he'd already solved. You marry me now, or you leave this cathedral in handcuffs. Those are your options, Miss Johnson. I looked past him toward the side exit where Agent Morrison waited with his backup and his warrant and his absolute certainty of my guilt. Then I looked at the empty space where Scott should have been standing, where I believed my future would begin. Some part of me had died in the last 30 minutes. The part that trusted easily. The part that believed in fairy tales and happy endings and men who meant what they promised. What rose in its place was colder, sharper. If I was going to survive this, I needed to stop being a victim and start being a player. I met Yejune's dark gaze and saw my own rage reflected back at me. Fine. The word came out steady, final. I'll marry you. His smile widened a fraction. Approval mixed with something that looked dangerously close to satisfaction. Excellent choice, Mrs. Park. The cathedral doors closed behind us with a sound like a vault ceiling shut. The ceremony took 11 minutes. 11 minutes for a judge to appear from nowhere, his face professionally blank as he recited words that meant everything and nothing. 11 minutes for Yejune's attorney to produce a marriage license that shouldn't have existed but somehow did, complete with stamps and signatures and the seal of official legitimacy. 11 minutes for my entire life to be legally bound to a man whose last name I'd learned 20 minutes ago. I signed where they told me to sign. Diamond Johnson became Diamond Park with the stroke of a pen, and the cold press of a platinum band Yejune slid onto my finger without ceremony or sentiment. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. He'd known my ring size the same way he'd known everything else about me. The federal agents will receive notification within the hour, the attorney said, snapping his briefcase shut. The injunction is now backed by spousal privilege. They'll need a new warrant and a much stronger case. Yejune nodded once, dismissed him with a look. Then his hand was on the small of my back, firm and possessive, guiding me toward the cathedral's side entrance where 3 black SUVs waited like a motorcade for someone important. Someone protected. Someone owned. The wedding gown felt like a costume now. A prop in someone else's play. Your things will be collected from your apartment and brought to the estate, Yejune said as one of his guards opened the rear door of the center vehicle. Not asking. Informing. Everything you need will be provided. I slid into the leather interior, and he followed, the door closing with a heavy, final thunk. The windows were tinted so dark the world outside became shadows and shapes, distorted and distant. The engine purred to life. We pulled away from the cathedral, from the disaster of my almost wedding, from the last place anyone knew me as Diamond Johnson, waitress, nobody free. The silence in the vehicle was suffocating. Where are we going? My voice sounded strange. Too small for the rage building inside me. Home. Your home. Our home now. He didn't look at me as he said it, his attention on his phone, fingers moving across the screen with the efficiency of a man who controlled empires with text messages. You'll have your own suite.
Private. Secure.
Comfortable. A gilded cage. That made him pause. His gaze slid toward me, dark and unreadable. Would you prefer a federal holding cell? Because I can turn this vehicle around. I bit down on the response, burning my tongue. He was right, and he knew it. I'd made my choice back in that cathedral. Survival over pride. Strategy over dignity. The city blurred past the tinted windows as we drove north, away from my neighborhood with its cramped apartments and corner bodegas, away from everything familiar. The buildings grew taller, sleeker, the streets wider and emptier. Old money neighborhoods where people like me only existed to serve. 30 minutes later, we turned onto a private road that wound through manicured grounds that looked more like a park than a driveway. Iron gates opened automatically as we approached, closing behind us with mechanical precision. The estate rose ahead like something out of a different century, all stone and glass and brutal modern architecture that screamed wealth and power and absolute control. We stopped at the entrance where staff in crisp uniforms waited like a receiving line. Yejun exited first, then offered his hand. I took it because refusing felt like starting a war I couldn't win.
Not yet. His palm was warm against mine. Steady.
The hand of a man who'd never trembled, never doubted, never lost. Inside, the foyer soared 3 stories high, all marble and dark wood and art that probably cost more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes. A woman in her 50s approached, her posture military straight, her eyes assessing me with the cool efficiency of an appraiser evaluating merchandise. "This is Mrs. Choi," Yejun said. "She manages the household. Anything you need, you ask her." Mrs. Choi bowed slightly. I tried to return it, feeling ridiculous in the wedding gown. "Your suite is prepared, Mrs. Park," she said, her English crisp and formal. "I'll show you up." "No." Yejun's voice stopped her mid-step. "I'll take her." Something passed between them, a look that said this wasn't protocol, that he was breaking his own rules. Mrs. Choi withdrew without argument. Yejun led me up a sweeping staircase to the 2nd floor, down a hallway lined with photographs I didn't have time to examine, and through double doors into a suite that was larger than my entire apartment had been. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked grounds that stretched to a wall I couldn't see the end of. A king-sized bed dominated one side, made up in white linens that probably had a thread count I couldn't pronounce. Fresh flowers on every surface. A door that presumably led to a bathroom. Another that might have been a closet. Beautiful. Expensive. Empty. "You're safe here," Yejun said from behind me, his voice closer than I expected. "No one enters this estate without my permission. No one touches what's mine without consequences." I turned to face him. "Is that what I am now?" "Yours." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those dark eyes. Recognition, maybe. Respect for the fact that I'd asked the question directly. "You're my wife. My asset. My protection." He stepped closer, and I forced myself not to retreat. "And yes, Diamond, you're mine. That's the bargain you accepted. And what are you to me?" The corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. "Your shield. Your weapon. Your key to destroying the man who tried to destroy you." He reached out, his fingers brushing the platinum band on my finger. "And the only thing standing between you and a lifetime in federal prison." He left me standing there in a wedding gown worth thousands in a room designed for someone else's life, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded like a lock engaging. I looked down at the ring on my finger, at the window that showed me a world I could see but not touch, at the luxury that surrounded me like chains made of silk and steel. I'd escaped one prison only to enter another. The only question was whether I'd learn to survive it or learn to rule it. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. The bed was too soft, the silence too complete, the weight of the ring on my finger too foreign. When dawn broke over the manicured grounds, painting everything in shades of gold that felt like mockery, I gave up pretending. A soft knock came at 7 exactly. "Enter," I called, my voice rough from disuse. Mrs. Choi appeared with a breakfast tray and clothes draped over her arm. Simple, expensive black pants, a silk blouse, understated in a way that probably cost more than a month's rent at my old apartment. "Mr. Park requests your presence in his study at 8, she said, setting the tray on a side table. "He asks that you eat first. Not a request. An order wrapped in courtesy. I ate because I needed the fuel, not because I tasted any of it. Changed because showing up in a wedding gown would have been pathetic. When I descended the stairs at 8 precisely, One of Yejun's guards was waiting to escort me through the maze of hallways. The study was all dark wood and leather, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and windows that overlooked a private garden. Yejun sat behind a massive desk, his suit jacket discarded, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows revealing forearms that were all lean muscle and ink. The tattoo I'd glimpsed at the cathedral continued up his arm, a dragon, intricate and deadly, coiled around his skin like a promise of violence. He looked up as I entered, and I saw the exhaustion he was too controlled to show anyone else. Dark shadows under those sharp eyes. The kind of tired that came from running an empire that never slept. Sit. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat, spine straight, chin up. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing me cower. He slid a tablet across the desk. The screen showed a three-dimensional render of a device no bigger than my thumb, sleek, black, innocuous. The flash drive Scott had given me. The Black Ledger, Yejun said, his voice taking on the cadence of a briefing. Not the device itself, that's just the key. The ledger is a distributed database, encrypted across 17 servers in 12 countries. It contains account numbers, access codes, authentication protocols, and geographic coordinates for every significant asset my organization controls. He pulled up another screen. Numbers scrolled past, each line representing millions. The total at the bottom made my stomach drop. $2,300,700,000. Offshore holdings, he continued. Real estate.
Art. Gold.
Bearer bonds. Cryptocurrency wallets. Everything liquid enough to move quickly, but secure enough to be untraceable. Without the ledger, I can't access any of it. And without access, my operations collapse within weeks. Why not just use a password? The question came out sharper than intended. Why something this elaborate? His smile was cold. Because in my world, Miss Johnson, trust is a commodity in short supply. The ledger requires 3 layers of authentication: the physical device, a 64-character passphrase, and a biometric scan. Only 3 people had all 3 components. Myself, my technology director, and the man I trusted to maintain the security infrastructure. Scott. Scott Tom was never his real name. Yejun's fingers moved across the tablet, pulling up a photograph. Same face, different hair, younger. His name is James Scott Thomas. Former NSA contractor, specialized in cryptographic systems before he went private sector. I paid him 7 figures annually to ensure my assets remained invisible. The betrayal carved a fresh wound. Every conversation about his boring IT job had been a lie. Every complaint about tedious meetings and demanding clients had been theater. He spent 18 months planning this, Yejun said, his voice devoid of emotion. Building backdoors into the system. Creating redundancies I didn't know about. And finding the perfect shield. His gaze locked onto mine. Someone with no criminal record, no connections, no reason to be suspected. Someone trusting enough to hold onto a flash drive without asking questions. Someone stupid enough, I corrected bitterly. Someone kind enough. The distinction surprised me. Scott studied you for 3 months before making contact. Every waitress shift, every conversation, every routine. He chose you because you're the opposite of what he is. Honest, loyal, predictable. He knew you'd never question him. I wanted to argue, to defend myself, but the truth sat like lead in my chest. He was right. I'd been the perfect mark. The device you had was a decoy, Yejun continued. A fake with just enough real data to trigger federal alerts and keep their attention on you while he ran. The real ledger is hidden somewhere only he can access. Then what do you need me for? If he has it. He has the device, but not complete access. Yejun leaned forward, his intensity pinning me in place. The passphrase is 64 characters, generated from a seed phrase he memorized. But there's a final layer, a security question only he can answer. And based on our intelligence, he's been trying to crack it for 3 days. A security question? Something personal. Something he'd remember, but no one else could guess. Yejun's eyes burned into mine. Which is where you become invaluable, Diamond. You spent 6 months with him. You know his habits, his patterns, his tells. You know how he thinks, what he values, where his mind goes when he's under pressure. The weight of what he was asking settled over me like a physical thing. You want me to help you find him. I want you to help me predict him. Yejun stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. He stopped close enough that I could smell cedar and smoke. Scott is running, but he's not random. He has patterns, preferences, places he feels safe. You've seen those places.
You've heard him talk about them.
You know him in ways my analysts never could. I thought I knew him, I said quietly. I was wrong about everything.
No.
Yejun's hand caught my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. You knew the mask he wore, but masks reveal more than they hide to the right observer. You just didn't know you were observing. His thumb brushed my jaw, the touch almost gentle. Tell me, Diamond, when Scott was stressed, where did his mind go? What did he talk about? What made him feel secure? The question opened a floodgate of memories I'd been trying to suppress. Late-night conversations. Casual mentions of places and things that had seemed meaningless at the time. But Yejun was right about one thing. I'd been watching. I'd been listening. I'd been collecting data without even knowing it. And now that data was the only weapon I had left. Yejun's hand dropped from my chin. He returned to his desk and opened a drawer, withdrawing a manila folder thick with documents. He set it in front of me with the care of someone handling explosives. Before we go further, you need to understand exactly who you were engaged to. I stared at the folder like it might bite. I already know he's a liar and a thief. You know the surface. Yejun's voice carried a warning. What's inside this folder is everything else. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. There's no going back to any illusion you might still be holding on to. My laugh came out jagged. What illusion? He left me at the altar and framed me for federal crimes. What's left to protect? Hope, Yejun said quietly. The hope that some small part of it was real. The words hit like a physical blow because he was right. Some pathetic part of me was still clinging to the possibility that Scott had felt something, that I hadn't been completely blind, that 6 months of my life hadn't been an utter fiction. I reached for the folder with trembling fingers. The first page was a marriage certificate. James Scott Thomas and Rebecca Chen, married 7 years ago in San Francisco. Current status: active. Not divorced. Not separated. Active. He's married. The words felt like glass in my throat. Very much so. Yejun pulled up an image on the tablet. A woman with kind eyes and an easy smile, standing next to Scott, James, at what looked like a family barbecue. His arm was around her waist. The gold band on his finger caught the sunlight. Rebecca is a software engineer at Google. They have a home in Palo Alto. 2 cars. A dog named Apollo. He swiped to the next image. Scott and Rebecca at a wedding, dancing. Another of them hiking, his lips pressed to her temple. Another from last Christmas, wrapped in matching ugly sweaters, laughing at something off camera. Each photograph was a knife between my ribs. She has no idea what he does for a living. Yejun continued, his tone clinical, detached. She thinks he's a legitimate security consultant who travels frequently for work. She posts about missing him on social media. Counts down the days until he comes home. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the roaring in my ears. Keep going, Yejun said. You need to see all of it. The next section detailed Scott's financial crimes before he ever touched Yejun's ledger. Embezzlement from his previous employer, a cybersecurity firm in Seattle. $4 million siphoned over 18 months through ghost accounts and falsified invoices. The investigation had gone cold when he disappeared, assumed to have fled the country. He didn't flee, Yejun said. He came to work for me under a new identity, complete with forged credentials and a fabricated employment history. I paid him well, protected him, and he repaid that by studying my systems long enough to learn how to rob me. The next pages were bank statements. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, Singapore. Money transferred in careful increments, small enough to avoid detection but large enough to build a comfortable escape fund. Dates that coincided with trips he'd told me were for work conferences. Cities he described in detail over dinner while holding my hand across the table. All of it lies. All of it calculated. The final section made my vision blur. A dossier on me. Photographs taken from a distance, me leaving my apartment, me at work in the restaurant, me at the grocery store. Dates and times logged with surveillance precision. Notes in Scott's handwriting analyzing my routines, my vulnerabilities, my desperate desire for stability. Target exhibits strong loyalty patterns and emotional dependence markers. I read aloud, my voice flat. Limited social network. Financially unstable. Mother's medical debt creates psychological pressure for security. Ideal candidate for long-term manipulation. There was more. Analysis of my work schedule. Assessment of my exploitable traits. Trusting, accommodating, conflict-averse. A timeline for the relationship. 3 months to establish contact. 2 months to build dependence. 1 month to propose. Everything had been a formula. A equation he'd solved with clinical precision. He chose me because I was easy to break. The words tasted like poison. He chose you because you were kind in a world where kindness is rare, Yejun corrected. And he weaponized that kindness because he's a coward who hides behind people instead of facing consequences. I closed the folder with shaking hands. The heartbreak I'd felt standing at that altar, the humiliation, the confusion, the desperate wondering of what I'd done wrong, all of it crystallized into something else. Something colder. Something sharp enough to cut. He studied me like I was a mark. My voice came out steady now, stripped of emotion. Photographed me. Analyzed me. Decided I was weak enough to use and stupid enough not to notice. Yes. He told Rebecca he loved her while he was planning to marry me, kissed her goodbye, and flew across the country to put a ring on my finger. Yes. And he thought he'd get away with it. Thought I'd be too broken or too scared or too stupid to fight back. Yejun's eyes glittered with something that might have been approval. That was his critical miscalculation. I stood, the rage flowing through my veins like ice water, clarifying everything. The pain was still there, it would probably always be there, but it no longer controlled me. It fueled me. You said you needed me to help you find him. I met Yejun's gaze with a steadiness I didn't know I possessed. You were wrong. I don't want to help you find him. His expression didn't change, but I saw the sharp attention, the predatory focus. I want to destroy him. The words came out quiet, final. I want to take everything he stole from you. I want to make sure he loses everything, his freedom, his money, his wife, his future. I want him to know what it feels like to be gutted by someone he underestimated. A slow smile spread across Yejun's face. It was the first genuine expression I'd seen from him. Pure, cold satisfaction. Now, he said softly, we can begin. Yejun gestured to the chair I'd abandoned.
Sit.
We have work to do. I sat, but everything felt different now. The power dynamic had shifted in some subtle way I couldn't quite name. I was still trapped, still married to a criminal, still facing federal charges without him. But I wasn't helpless. Not anymore. Your intelligence team, I said, my mind already moving, calculating. What have they found so far? Yejun pulled up a digital map on his tablet, tapping it to expand across the desk's surface via a hidden projector. Red dots marked locations across 3 continents. Scott's phone last pinged in Los Angeles before going dark. He withdrew $20,000 in cash from an ATM in Koreatown 3 days ago. Sloppy, but he needed liquid capital. We tracked his credit cards to purchases at an outdoor supply store and a burner phone retailer. After that, nothing. He's running analog, I said, leaning forward to study the map. No digital footprint means no trace. Correct. Which means we need to predict his destination rather than track his movement. Yejun's fingers moved across the map, pulling up data streams. My analysts have compiled a list of countries with non-extradition treaties, cities with strong expat communities where he could disappear, and locations with the infrastructure he'd need to access the ledger remotely. The list was extensive. Bangkok, Buenos Aires, Hanoi, Casablanca, dozens more. Each one a possibility. Each one a dead end, without more information. What about Rebecca? I asked. His wife. Have you contacted her? She filed a missing persons report 2 days ago. Claims she hasn't heard from him since he left for a business trip to New York last week. Either she's genuinely ignorant or she's a better liar than he is. She doesn't know. I said it with certainty. If she knew what he was, she wouldn't have posted those pictures. Wouldn't have played the worried wife on social media. He compartmentalized his life. Kept us all separate and ignorant. Yejun studied me with that unnerving intensity. You're thinking like an analyst. I'm thinking like someone who spent 6 months watching him without knowing I was watching him. I stood, moving closer to the projection. Your team is looking at this wrong. They're thinking about where a criminal would run. But Scott isn't running like a criminal. He's running like someone who thinks he's smarter than everyone chasing him. Explain. I pointed to the list of non-extradition countries. These are too obvious. He'd know you'd assume he'd go somewhere safe from legal consequences. He's arrogant enough to think he can outsmart that assumption. So where would he go? The memory surfaced without warning, so small I'd almost forgotten it. A Tuesday night 3 months ago. Scott had been drinking whiskey, loose and relaxed in a way he rarely allowed himself. We'd been talking about dream vacations, the kind of pointless conversation people have when they're pretending their lives aren't complicated. If I could disappear anywhere, he'd said, staring into his glass, I'd go somewhere no one would ever think to look. Somewhere so normal, so boring, so aggressively average that it becomes invisible. At the time, I'd laughed. Asked him where that would be. He'd smiled that secret smile. The last place anyone expects a criminal to hide. Suburbia. He's staying in the United States, I said, the certainty settling in my bones. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere suburban and unremarkable. Yejun's expression didn't change, but I felt his attention sharpen. My analysts ruled out domestic locations. Too much surveillance, too much risk. Your analysts don't know how he thinks. I pulled up a chair, sitting across from him with new authority. Scott told me once that the best place to hide wasn't in darkness, it was in plain sight. He said criminals get caught because they act like criminals. They run to places criminals run to. They behave in ways that trigger suspicion. And you think he's doing the opposite. I think he's renting a house in some middle American suburb right now. Probably under a new identity he's been preparing for months. Somewhere with good internet infrastructure because he needs it to access the ledger, but nowhere exotic enough to draw attention. He's not in Bangkok or Buenos Aires. He's in places like Columbus, Ohio, or Raleigh, North Carolina, or Phoenix, Arizona. Yejun leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. That expands our search area exponentially. The United States has thousands of suburban communities. But he has patterns. I was thinking out loud now, pieces clicking together. He needs specific things. High-speed internet, obviously. Privacy, but not isolation. Isolated houses draw attention. He needs to be somewhere he can receive packages without suspicion, somewhere with good infrastructure but low security presence. New construction developments, Yejun said, already pulling up new data. Subdivisions with high turnover, short-term rental markets. Exactly. And he needs to be within driving distance of an international airport. Not the airport itself, too much surveillance, but close enough that when he cracks the ledger, he can move fast. Yejun's fingers flew across the tablet, overlaying new filters on the map. The red dots consolidated, narrowed. Dozens became a handful. You're assuming he hasn't already cracked it, Yejun said. If he'd cracked it, he'd be gone. The fact that he's still in hiding means he's still working on it. That security question is stopping him. I met Yejun's gaze. Which means we still have time. To find him. To trap him. Something passed between us in that moment. An understanding. A recognition that we were no longer captor and captive, but something else. Something more dangerous. Partners. Yejun stood, moving around the desk. He offered his hand, and I took it. His grip was firm, his skin warm against mine. Tell me everything, he said. Every conversation, every habit, every casual comment he ever made. We're going to build a profile so complete that we'll know where he is before he makes his next move. I squeezed his hand once before releasing it. I remember everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every moment he thought I was too stupid to notice what he was really saying. Good. Yejun's smile was sharp and cold and absolutely lethal. Then let's teach him the cost of underestimating you. For the first time since standing at that altar, I smiled back. It felt like baring teeth. Let's hunt. We worked through the night. Yejun's study transformed into a war room. Maps covered every surface. Laptops displayed data streams from his intelligence network. Coffee appeared at regular intervals, delivered by Mrs. Choi, who asked no questions and disappeared like smoke. I sat across from Yejun at the massive desk, our chairs pulled close, knees nearly touching as we hunched over the glowing screens. The proximity should have felt uncomfortable. Instead, it felt like necessity. Like we were two parts of the same weapon being forged in real time. Start with restaurants, Yejun said, pulling up a blank document. You said he had preferences. Always Italian when he was stressed. Never chain restaurants, he called them soul-crushing. He liked places with dark wood, quiet corners, waitstaff who didn't hover. I closed my eyes, reaching for details I'd filed away without thinking. He'd order the same thing at every Italian place. Carbonara, no modifications. Single malt scotch, neat. He said consistency was underrated. Yejun's fingers flew across the keyboard, logging every detail. Consistency is predictable. What else? He ran every morning. 6 miles. Always the same route near wherever he was staying. Said it helped him think. He'd come back with this specific energy, focused, almost manic. That's when he'd make decisions. Morning runner in a suburban area will be noticed by neighbors. Creates a pattern we can track. Yejun pulled up satellite imagery of the target cities we'd narrowed down. What about his living space? How did he organize his environment? The memory came with startling clarity. Scott's apartment, the one I'd thought was his real home, had been meticulously arranged. Everything had its place. Cables organized and labeled. Books arranged by subject, then alphabetically. He couldn't work if things were chaotic. Said disorder made him feel like he was losing control. Obsessive-compulsive tendencies, Yejun murmured, making notes. He needs order to function. That's exploitable. He also needed multiple exit routes. I thought it was paranoia from his security work, but now. I gestured to the maps. Wherever he is, he's mapped every way out. Front door, back door, windows. Probably chosen the location based on escape vectors. Smart. Yejun's expression held grudging respect. Infuriating, but smart. We worked through his media consumption, true crime podcasts, chess channels, anything about Cold War espionage. His exercise habits beyond running, bodyweight workouts, never gyms. His phone usage patterns, always with him, but face down on tables, notifications disabled. He was hiding in plain sight even when he had nothing to hide. I said, the realization bitter. Everything about him was controlled, calculated. Except with you. Yejun's voice made me look up. His gaze was steady, analytical, but something else lurked beneath. He had to maintain the fiction of normalcy, had to pretend to be human. That's where he made mistakes. What mistakes? The details you remember. The casual comments that revealed his real preferences. He could control his actions, but habits slipped through. Muscle memory. Unconscious choices. Yejun leaned closer, his intensity focused entirely on me. That's why you're invaluable, Diamond. You saw him when he wasn't performing, when he thought you were safe to be careless around. The words landed differently than they should have. Not as manipulation or flattery, but as recognition, as respect. Tell me about his nightmares, Yejun said quietly. I blinked. How did you know? Men like Scott don't sleep well. The compartmentalization requires constant maintenance. At night, the walls crack. His eyes held shadows I recognized. Did he talk in his sleep? Sometimes. I'd forgotten until now. Numbers, mostly. Long strings of numbers. I thought it was work stress. And once he woke up gasping, said something about the old house before he realized I was awake. Then he laughed it off, said it was nothing. Yejun went very still. The old house. Not my old house or a house. The old house. Like a specific place with significance. I didn't think anything of it at the time. Because you weren't trained to listen for intelligence. But your mind recorded it anyway. Yejun pulled up a new search, his movements sharp with renewed energy. James Scott Thomas grew up in Portland, Oregon. We have records of his childhood address. Let me check. His fingers paused over the keyboard. When he looked up, his expression was predatory. The house where he grew up was sold 8 months ago. Purchased by a property management company that specializes in short-term rentals. It's currently listed as occupied, but the renter's information is minimal. Cash deposit, month-to-month lease. My heart kicked against my ribs. That's too coincidental. Or exactly the kind of arrogant, sentimental mistake a man who thinks he's smarter than everyone would make. Yejun spun the laptop to face me. He went home. Not to his childhood home literally, but close enough to feel connected. Portland suburbs. Probably within 10 miles of where he grew up. I stared at the map, watching Yejun's team narrow the search radius in real time. Red dots consolidated into a cluster northeast of Portland. Quiet neighborhoods. Good internet infrastructure.
Close to the airport.
He's there. I breathed. We need to be certain. Yejun's hand covered mine on the desk, Warm and solid. Not possessive. Anchoring. What else? What detail are we missing? I forced my mind back through 6 months of calculated deception, looking for the cracks. He always faced the door in restaurants. Always. Said it was a habit from his security work, but it's tactical awareness. He'll run a place where he can see anyone approaching. Corner lot or end unit. High vantage point. And he mentioned once that he missed the rain. Said Los Angeles was too dry, too bright. It felt wrong. Yejun's smile was sharp and satisfied.
Portland. Rain.
Familiarity disguised as nostalgia. We spent the next 4 hours building the profile with surgical precision. Every casual comment became data. Every habit became a vector. The man I'd thought I loved dissolved into an algorithm, predictable and pathetic in his arrogance. Somewhere past 3 a.m., I looked up to find Yejun watching me. Not analyzing, just watching.
What?
I asked. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Scott thought he was invisible, but every man had a pressure point. His was the ledger itself. He's been trying to crack the security question for 5 days now, Yejun explained as his team assembled in the estate's lower level, a command center I hadn't known existed until that morning. Screens lined the walls, displaying real-time surveillance feeds, encrypted communication channels, and a 3-dimensional render of the target house in Beaverton. He's getting desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. So we give him what he thinks is a way in, I said, studying the tactical layout. 6 of Yejun's operatives surrounded the conference table, all of them watching me with expressions that ranged from skeptical to cautiously impressed. I'd proven my worth in theory. Now came the test. We leak information through channels he's monitoring, Yejun continued, pulling up a communication intercept. Make him believe there's a 48-hour window where the ledger's security protocols undergo maintenance cycling. A vulnerability he can exploit if he acts fast. But there's no actual vulnerability, I said.
No.
But he doesn't know that. He'll see an opportunity to bypass the security question entirely using a backdoor he built into the system, one we've let him think is still functional. Yejun's smile was cold. The moment he attempts access, his location pings every alarm we've set. And we move. What if he smells the trap? He won't. Yejun turned to face me fully. Because you're going to sell it. My stomach dropped.
How?
You're going to call him. The room went silent. One of the operatives, a woman with sharp features and sharper eyes, spoke in rapid Korean. Yejun responded in the same language, his tone brooking no argument. She fell silent, but her expression remained dubious. She thinks using you is too risky, Yejun translated, though I'd caught enough of the words to understand. She thinks Scott will recognize manipulation. What do you think? I asked him. His gaze held mine. I think you're the only person on Earth who can make him believe this is real. Because part of you wants it to be. The truth of it hit like a blade.
He was right.
Some pathetic fragment of me still wanted to hear Scott's voice, still wanted to demand why, still wanted closure that would never satisfy. What do I say? Yejun handed me a burner phone and a script. You're terrified. Alone. The federal agents are closing in. Yejun is out of the country on business, and you've discovered information about the ledger. Information you'll trade for your freedom. You need Scott's help. He'll never believe I'd help him. He'll believe you're scared enough to help yourself. That's all he needs. Yejun's hand found my shoulder, steadying. You can do this, Diamond. You've been performing for him your entire relationship. One more time. I read through the script twice, memorizing not the words, but the emotional beats. Fear, desperation, carefully calculated vulnerability. Everything Scott expected from me. Everything he'd trained me to show him. When
I asked. Now.
Yejun's tech specialist, a thin man who moved like shadows, set up the call routing. Untraceable, bouncing through servers in 8 countries, designed to appear like a panicked woman using a stolen phone. He nodded once. Ready. I dialed the number Yejun's team had identified as Scott's current burner. It rang 3 times.
4.
I was about to hang up when... Hello. His voice. The same voice that had whispered promises and lies against my skin for 6 months. The voice I'd trusted completely. My prepared words dissolved. Yejun stepped closer, his presence behind me like an anchor. Scott. I let my voice break on his name. Not entirely acting. Oh God. Scott, please don't hang up. Silence. Then, cautiously. Diamond? How did you get this number? I broke into Yejun's office. He's in Seoul, something about damage control. I found files. So many files. I paced, letting genuine agitation bleed through. The FBI came to the estate this morning. They have new warrants. Yejun's lawyers are stalling, but they said I have maybe 48 hours before. Slow down.
Command in his voice now.
The analyst taking over. What did you find in the files? Information about the ledger. About some kind of maintenance window. I don't understand all of it, but there are codes, sequences. Something about a 48-hour vulnerability cycle starting tonight at midnight. I let desperation sharpen my tone. I need out, Scott. I need immunity. The feds said they'd deal if I give them something valuable. You're thinking of turning over Yejun's information? He almost sounded impressed. I'm thinking of surviving. Not acting now. Pure truth. You left me here. You left me to take the fall for everything. But if I give them enough to bring down Yejun's organization, they'll let me walk. I need to know if what I found is actually valuable. The silence stretched. I could almost hear him calculating, weighing probabilities, deciding if I was stupid enough to be useful one more time. What exactly did the files say? His voice careful now. Interested. I fed him the technical details Yejun's team had crafted, plausible enough to seem real, specific enough to trigger his greed. Dates, times, protocol specifications. The kind of information that would let him bypass the security question and access the ledger before Yejun discovered the breach. If this is real, Scott said slowly, I could move the assets tonight. 48 hours is enough time. Is it valuable? I pressed. Will the feds actually deal for this? Diamond. Something in his voice softened, and I recognized the manipulation immediately. The false intimacy. I know I hurt you. I know you have every right to hate me. But you're smart to be thinking about yourself first. Yes, this information is valuable. Very valuable. Then I'm giving it to them. Wait. Sharp now. Think about this. If you turn over Yejun, you're burning a very dangerous bridge. He'll come after you eventually. The feds can't protect you forever. I don't have a choice. You do. His voice dropped to that persuasive register I'd once found irresistible. Give me the codes. Let me access the ledger and disappear properly. I'll transfer 5 million to an account in your name. Enough to disappear anywhere you want. Yejun never knows you are involved and you're free. There it was. The trap springing both ways. You do that. I let hope color my voice. After everything? I never wanted you hurt, Diamond. You were collateral damage. Let me make it right.
Lies.
Every word. But I played my part. The codes are at the estate. In Yejun's office. I can send them to you in an hour. The house in Beaverton looked exactly as I'd predicted. Corner lot, 2 stories, perfect sight lines. Lights glowed in the second-floor window where Scott had set up his command center. From our position 3 houses down in Yejun's armored SUV, I could see his shadow moving behind the curtains. Pacing. Agitated. Waiting for codes that would never work. He's been trying to access the system for the past 20 minutes, the tech specialist reported from the surveillance van, his voice crackling through the comms. Getting increasingly frustrated. Each failed attempt makes him more reckless. Yejun sat beside me, perfectly still in the darkness, his attention divided between the tactical feeds on his tablet and the house itself. His team was positioned at every exit point, 6 operatives, armed and invisible, waiting for his signal. "He'll run soon," I said quietly. "When he realizes the codes are fake, he'll panic." "Let him." Yejun's voice was cold satisfaction. "There's nowhere to go." My phone buzzed. A text from the burner number. My stomach clenched even though I'd expected it. "This isn't working. Did you send the right codes?" "I showed Yejun." He nodded once. I typed back. "I sent exactly what was in the file. Maybe you're entering them wrong?" The response came instantly, all caps, the control cracking. "I'm not entering them wrong. These codes are bullshit." "Now," Yejun said into his comms, his voice dropping to command register. "All units move." Everything happened with choreographed precision. Yejun's operatives converged on the house from 4 directions simultaneously. The front door splintered inward under a battering ram. Flashbangs detonated, the sound reaching us even from 3 houses away. Shouting in Korean and English, commands to get down, to show hands, to not move. It was over in 45 seconds. Target secured. The team leader's voice came through. No injuries. No shots fired. Package recovered. Yejun turned to me. "Ready?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. We approached the house together. Yejun's hand rested on the small of my back. Not possessive now, but protective. Supportive. Partners walking into the endgame together. Inside, the air still smelled of burnt chemicals from the flashbangs. Yejun's operatives had cleared every room with military efficiency. One stood guard at the stairs. Another secured the perimeter. Professional, silent, lethal. Scott was on his knees in the center of the second-floor office, zip-tied and surrounded. His laptop sat open on the desk, error messages flashing across multiple screens. The black ledger, the real device, sat in an evidence bag beside it, innocuous and deadly. He looked up as we entered. His face was a mess, bleeding lip, forming bruise on his cheekbone from where he'd fought back. But it was his eyes that stopped me. The shock. The absolute incomprehension. Diamond. He said my name like a question. Like he couldn't process what he was seeing. "What are you? How did you?" "Hello, Scott." My voice came out steady.
Strong.
Nothing like the terrified woman he'd spoken 2 hours earlier. "Or should I call you James?" Understanding dawned. Then denial. Then rage. "You set me up." "You actually," he laughed, the sound bitter and disbelieving. "You were working with him the whole time."
No.
I stepped closer, and Yejun let me, his presence a shadow at my back. "I was working against you. There's a difference." "I don't understand." Scott looked between us, his analyst brain trying to process the impossible. "You're not smart enough for this. You're a waitress. You're underestimated." I finished. "The word you're looking for is underestimated. You spent 6 months analyzing me, studying me, deciding I was weak enough to use. You cataloged every vulnerability, every pressure point, every exploitable trait." I crouched down to his level, meeting his eyes. "But you missed the most important thing." "What?" The word came out strangled. "I was watching you too. I let the truth settle between us. Every habit, every pattern, every casual comment you thought was meaningless. I remembered all of it. And when you tried to destroy me, I used everything you taught me about being underestimated to destroy you instead. Scott's face went pale. The phone call, the codes. That was a performance, I confirmed. One you believed completely because you needed me to be that desperate, scared woman. It fit your assessment, your profile, your certainty that I'd never be capable of outthinking you. I stood, looking down at him from a position of power for the first time. You were right about one thing. I am predictable. I observe. I remember. I serve. But you mistook those qualities for weakness when they were actually weapons. Diamond. His voice cracked, and I heard the manipulation starting. The last desperate attempt.
Please.
We can still. There is no we. I cut him off with surgical precision. There never was. You used me as a disposable shield.
You studied me like a lab rat.
You photographed me without my knowledge and reduced my entire existence to exploitable traits on a dossier. I felt Yejun's presence solidify behind me, his strength lending me certainty. But here's what you didn't account for, Scott. I'm not alone anymore. I'm not a waitress you can manipulate. I'm the woman who found you, trapped you, and took everything you thought you'd stolen. The ledger, he breathed, finally understanding the totality of his failure. Recovered, Yejun confirmed, speaking for the first time. Along with enough evidence to ensure you'll spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Theft of classified information, embezzlement, identity fraud, and my personal favorite, attempting to steal from the Kung Pai. His smile was a promise of suffering. The federal authorities are already en route. They'll take you into custody. But before they do, you should know something. Scott looked up, the last of his arrogance crumbling. Your wife knows everything now, Yejun continued, his voice clinical. Rebecca received a comprehensive dossier this morning. Every crime, every lie, every manipulation, including photographs of you and Diamond, and evidence that you planned to abandon her with nothing while you disappeared. He paused, letting it sink in. She's filing for divorce, taking the house, and she's cooperating with federal prosecutors in exchange for immunity. The devastation on Scott's face was complete. He'd lost everything. The money, the freedom, the life he'd built, the woman he'd actually loved while using me as a tool. I should have felt satisfaction, triumph,
Victory.
Instead, I felt nothing. He was already irrelevant. I spent 6 months believing you were my future, I said quietly. 48 hours ago, I would have done anything to understand why you left me. But standing here now, looking at you on your knees, I shook my head. You're not worth the questions. You're not worth the closure. You're just a coward who got caught. I turned to leave. Yejun's hand found mine, our fingers intertwining naturally. Diamond, wait. Scott's voice cracked with desperation. I paused at the doorway, looking back one final time. My name is Mrs. Park now, and you're nothing. The federal agents arrived 6 minutes later, led by Agent Morrison with a warrant and a very smug expression. Scott was read his rights, processed, and led away in handcuffs while evidence teams cataloged every device, every document, every piece of his failed escape plan. Yejun and I watched from the surveillance van as they loaded Scott into an unmarked vehicle. His head was down, shoulders slumped, the image of complete defeat. How do you feel? Yejun asked. I considered the question honestly.
Free.
His arm came around my shoulders, pulling me against his side. I let myself lean into his strength, into the warmth that had nothing to do with calculation or transaction anymore. The federal charges against you are being dropped, he said quietly. My attorneys confirmed it an hour ago. Your name is clear. You're safe. Because of you. Because of us. He turned me to face him, his dark eyes holding something I'd never seen there before. Vulnerability. You could walk away now, Diamond. The marriage was for protection. The debt is cleared. Scott is finished. You're free to leave if that's what you want. The offer hung between us.
Real.
Genuine. A choice given freely. I looked up at this dangerous, complicated man who'd seen me as valuable when I'd thought myself worthless. Who'd trusted me when I'd earned nothing but his suspicion. Who'd stood beside me while I transformed from victim to victor. I'm not going anywhere, I said. His relief was visible. Good. We're partners now. Yes. His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. Partners. Equals. Whatever you want to be. I rose on my toes, closing the distance between us. I want to be your queen. When he kissed me, it tasted like revenge and victory, and the beginning of something far more dangerous than anything Scott could have imagined. The collateral bride had become the queen, and I was just getting started. 3 weeks later, the paperwork arrived. Official federal documents stamped and sealed, clearing Diamond Johnson, no, Diamond Park, of all charges. Insufficient evidence.
Case dismissed.
My name restored, my record clean, my freedom absolute. I stood in Yejune's study, the same room where this had all begun, holding papers that said I could walk away, could reclaim my old life, could pretend none of this had ever happened. I set them on his desk and walked to the window overlooking the estate grounds. Spring had arrived while we'd been hunting Scott. The gardens bloomed with colors I hadn't noticed before, vivid and alive and beautiful in a way that felt like a metaphor I was too tired to decode. The marriage can be annulled. Yejune's voice came from behind me, quiet and careful. My attorneys have drawn up the paperwork. You'd receive a settlement. Enough to start over anywhere you want. New city, new name if you prefer. Complete freedom. I didn't turn around. Is that what you want? What I want is irrelevant. His footsteps approached, measured and deliberate. You've paid your debt 10 times over. You found Scott, recovered the ledger, saved my organization from collapse. You owe me nothing, Diamond. That's not what I asked. Silence stretched between us, heavy with things unspoken. Then his hands settled on my shoulders, warm and solid, real in a way nothing had felt real for weeks. I want you to stay, he said, the words low and raw. But not because you're trapped. Not because you're afraid. Not because you think you have no other choice. I turned to face him. His expression was carefully neutral, but I'd learned to read the tells he hid from everyone else. The tension in his jaw. The slight crease between his brows. The way his hands remained on my shoulders like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. What if I stayed because I wanted to? I asked. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, carefully contained. Then I'd ask why. Because for the first time in my life, I feel like I matter. The words came easier than I expected. Not as someone's daughter, trying to pay off medical debt. Not as someone's employee, serving people who don't see me. Not as someone's fiancé, playing the role I thought I was supposed to play. I stepped closer, closing the space between us. With you, I'm seen. Actually seen. My mind, my skills, my value. Not just my willingness to be useful. You were always valuable, Diamond. Even before me. Maybe. But I didn't know it. I reached up, my fingers tracing the dragon tattoo visible at his collar. You taught me to see myself as a weapon instead of a victim. To use everything I'd been told was weakness, my observation, my memory, my ability to read people as power. His hand covered mine, pressing my palm flat against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong.
You taught yourself that.
I just gave you the battlefield. Then give me another one. The words came out certain, final. I don't want to go back to serving tables and hoping for tips and pretending I'm satisfied with being invisible. I want this. The strategy, the intelligence work, the feeling of being essential instead of expendable. You want to be part of the organization. Not a question. An understanding. I want to be part of your organization. I met his gaze directly. Your partner. Your equal. Your queen, like I said. I paused, then added with absolute honesty. And I want you. Not because you saved me or because I'm grateful or because I'm afraid to leave. But because when I'm with you, I feel alive in ways I never knew I could be. Yejun's control cracked. His hands framed my face, tilting my head back, his dark eyes searching mine with an intensity that should have been frightening but felt like coming home. You understand what you're choosing, he said, his voice rough. This life isn't safe. It isn't legal. There will be enemies, dangers, situations where your past as a waitress won't protect you anymore. Good. I smiled, and it felt fierce. I'm done being protected. I want to be dangerous. His laugh was low and genuine, the first truly unguarded sound I'd heard from him. You already are, Diamond. You just didn't know it yet. When he kissed me, it was different from that first victory kiss in Portland. This wasn't adrenaline or triumph or the high of revenge. This was intention.
Choice.
The deliberate decision to be seen and to see him in return. Not the mafia boss, not the calculated strategist, but the man beneath the armor who'd recognized my worth before I'd recognized it myself. I love you. The words slipped out before I could stop them, raw and unplanned. I know that's probably too soon or too complicated or too. I love you too. He cut me off, his forehead resting against mine. I've loved you since you stood in that cathedral and chose to survive instead of surrender. Since you used your pain as fuel instead of letting it break you. Since you looked at me and saw a partner instead of a prison. My throat tightened. So, we're really doing this? If you want it. His hand slid down to my waist, pulling me flush against him. But you need to understand what you're becoming. Not just my wife in name, but my partner in everything. You'll have access to information that could destroy empires. Power that people would kill for. Enemies who'll see you as a target the moment they understand your value to me. Then they'll learn what Scott learned, I said, steel in my voice. That underestimating me is a fatal mistake. Yejun's smile was pure predatory satisfaction. My queen. Your queen, I confirmed. Your partner. Your equal. The woman who'll stand beside you and make sure your enemies know exactly what they're facing. He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I tasted the promise of everything we'd build together. Not a fairy tale. Not a rescue. But a partnership forged in fire and strategy, and the brutal truth that we were both dangerous in ways the world hadn't yet learned to fear. When we finally broke apart, Yejun reached into his desk and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside was a ring. Not the platinum band he'd given me at our hasty wedding, but something else entirely. A black diamond set in white gold, cut to catch light and shadow in equal measure. This isn't about obligation or protection, he said, sliding it onto my finger beside the wedding band. This is a choice. My choice to have you as my partner. Your choice to stay and build an empire together. I looked down at the rings. One represented survival. One represented power. Together, they represented transformation. And that's where Diamond's story ends, or rather, where it truly begins. From a woman left humiliated at the altar, framed for crimes she didn't commit, to a queen who discovered her power came not from what she sacrificed, but from what she could strategize, observe, and conquer. Diamond's journey reminds us that our greatest strengths often hide in the places we've been taught to see as weaknesses. Her ability to watch, to listen, to remember every detail, the same skills that made her an exceptional waitress, became the weapon that brought down a criminal mastermind. She didn't need to be saved. She needed to be seen, to be valued, to be given the battlefield where her intelligence could finally become power. And when Yejun offered her freedom at the end, true, unconditional freedom, she chose to stay. Not because she was trapped, but because she'd finally found a partnership where she was an equal, where her mind mattered as much as her loyalty, where she could be both loved and dangerous. That's the story I wanted to tell. Not a rescue, not a fairy tale, but a transformation. Now I want to hear from you. What did you think of Diamond's journey from victim to queen? Did the revenge feel satisfying? Do you believe in the love between Diamond and Yejun? Or do you think she should have walked away when she had the chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love hearing your perspectives on these characters and their choices. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button to let me know you want more complex, powerful female characters who don't wait to be saved. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss when I drop the next dramatic, emotionally charged romance. Share this video with someone who loves mafia romance, enemies to lovers, or stories about women who discover their own power. And here's the real question I'll leave you with. If you were Diamond, standing in that study with legal documents that said you were free to go, free to start over, free to leave the dangerous world behind, would you have stayed or would you have walked away? Tell me in the comments. Be honest. Because sometimes the most dangerous choice isn't staying in the darkness, it's admitting you belong there. Coming soon, the next chapter in Diamond and Yejun's empire. Because a queen doesn't just claim her throne, she defends it. And trust me, their enemies are just getting started. Until next time, remember, you're not weak for being underestimated. You're strategic. And the moment they realize their mistake, that's when you strike. See you in the next story.